Welcome to the Fearless Training Raw Knowledge Podcast, where we talk everything training, nutrition, and lifestyle collectively. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Fearless Training Raw Knowledge Podcast. This is episode 15, and I'm your host as ever, Alex Connor. And today I've got a very anticipated episode with the one and only Nathan Wallace, who is a strength and conditioning coach at Hold Your Own. He's also the founder. This one has been in the pipeline for a while. I've really wanted to get Nathan onto the podcast as he's someone who has had a tremendous positive impact on my career, my training, and the way I think and approach my coaching as well. And I know he's a big inspiration for a lot of other coaches and physique athletes and powerlifters alike within the industry, and he's very highly respected. And very rightly so, because he's super humble, he's very knowledgeable, and at the end of the day, Nathan, he's a really down-to-earth great guy, as you'll find out in this episode. So for those of you who don't know about Nathan, because I know a lot of you will, his aim is to provide a more unique, holistic approach to contest preparation, strength coaching, personal training, or a year-round sort of diet regimen to get you looking and feeling your best. Nathan has numerous titles, which some of you may know, from natural bodybuilding and powerlifting, ensuring that he's not only got the knowledge behind him, but he's also got first-hand real-life experience as well. And that counts a lot, especially in today's industry as we move forward and we're on the pinnacle edge trying to get the best of the best out of the athletes, and also performance-based as well, for not only just on the platform, but the stage too. Nathan is himself, he leads by example. He's a pro bodybuilder in both the INBA and the PNBA and Musclemania. Now, when he stepped on stage, it was a few years ago now, he sent ripples worldwide when he stepped on with striated glutes, only seen at that time by the most elite pros in the world. So he was setting the standard back then for the conditioning. And now it's almost like, hey, if you want to be pro level, you've got to have striated glutes. That is just the standard now, which we'll sort of get into and touch base on a little bit in this episode. Along with his bodybuilding, he's also an elite powerlifter. He ranks very high in Australia, and he's won numerous powerlifting titles as well. And for all those little descriptions and specifics, I will put them in the show notes so you can see exactly what and how Nathan has achieved. And you can sort of get a gauge of how much of a talented athlete and a coach he is. And in this episode, we get into some of the nuts and bolts about prescription and programming. And it was a really interesting conversation with Nathan. And it was good to sit down. And we always end up talking everything, training. It's so easy to talk with someone that is very passionate about what they do. And man, we could have talked for a lot longer, and there's definitely going to be a round two where we delve into some more given subjects. So I think, guys, if you want to hear something specifically, if you want to know about something specifically, especially from Nathan and myself, you want some subjects for us to talk about, pop them in those comments below, send us an email, let us know what you want to hear, and we'll make sure we provide it. Because we know that there's a lot of key topics now, there's a lot of information out there, and sometimes it can be hard to gauge what is what and what isn't. And at the end of the day, we just want to provide, again, a better source of information, some more strategic and intelligent knowledge, so you guys can achieve your goals much more successfully in the long run. But I'm going to start rambling here, guys. This one is a phenomenal episode. I know you're going to get a lot out of it. And until next time, guys, enjoy this episode with Nathan Wallace. Nathan, welcome to the podcast. Thank you, my friend, for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Yes.
Absolutely my pleasure. So let's start off, as we always do, for those who are not aware. Tell us a little bit about what you do, first of all.
Okay, so I'm personally a strength coach. I've been coaching since I was 18 years old, straight out of school. So that's about 14 years now I've been coaching people personally. So yeah, I try to get people into better shape. I try to make people stronger. From there, I've been able to create a bit of a business out of it. So Whereas to now I have a reasonably successful business, I think, in coaching, where I have a few guys that work underneath me, and the business name's called Hold Your Own. And yeah, so we just try and get people into shape. We specialise in bodybuilding, physique coaching in general, powerlifting. A lot of, like myself, I do a fair bit of powerlifting and bodybuilding. That's where I kind of started. And a lot of the other coaches also do, so they also do bodybuilding and powerlifting. So it's kind of been a bit of a niche for us. But if anything, we also do have a very good, as much as I hate using the word, gen pop clientele. So I think that the crossover between the two is very marginal. You know, it's just how far do you want to take it, and how in depth and specific do you want to be with the client. So we definitely have a very good gen pop clientele as well. But yeah, we're at Hold Your Own, we're a strength and body recompositioning facility. We have a gym, and it's where it's our sort of hub. Yeah.
Awesome, man. And can we go in then a little bit where you started? Like, let's go right back. Like, why do you do what you do? Like, how did you fall in love with it? We talked a little bit about this, me and you a lot off camera. But you know,
we've known each other for a while, so
exactly, and it's been an education for me. Yeah. And I'm sure some of the viewers know a large inspiration you have referenced on some of the other podcasts as well. Yeah, a little bit about like why you fell in love with the iron game, I guess, and what inspired you to continue on and build what is now Hold Your Own, and a successful coaching business.
Yeah, well, it started because I was used to play football, used to play AFL, and my dream was always to be an AFL footballer. And when I was young, I was around 13 years old. I was trying to make rep sides, and I was very, very skinny, small kid. And used to get picked on a little bit at school for how small I was, just easily pushed around. And then also trying to make rep sides into football, I was getting pushed off the ball, and that was the feedback coming back from the coaches. It's like, you need to put a bit more size on, you're getting pushed off the ball. And for anyone that knows AFL footballers aren't the biggest of human beings anyway, because we do a lot of running, so to get told you're getting pushed off the ball meant I was very skinny. So my father, who used to compete a while ago, back in probably, I'd say the 70s, maybe, yeah. So around the 70s, he also owned a gym, and so he was looking to get back into it, and so bought us a bit of a setup at home. He used to do little bit and pieces at home. I used to watch him, and so then I started, and he taught me how to get in, training. And I just loved it from the get-go. Straight away, I kind of took a real big liking to it, and I saw results pretty quickly from it. Dad taught me a little bit about nutrition, very old school sort of style and methods of it. Yeah. But essentially, I just started feeding myself a lot, and increasing my protein intake, and just saw my strength go up, and then I sort of start seeing results. Didn't fast forward a couple more years, I kind of got to the point where I didn't quite make the NFL. I kind of thought, where am I going to go from here? A couple of people at the gym, I sort of joined the gym at that point in time, said to me, and I started straight out of school. I went straight into PTing, and a couple of people at the gym was like, you should compete in bodybuilding. You got a decent physique and stuff like that. So I got like a hack diet from a bodybuilder that used to come into the gym, and it was a very terrible, like looking back on it, it was terribly traumatic experience. Why I'd want to go back after something like that, I still don't know, but it was essentially tuna, like this, a quarter of a cup of oats maybe twice a day. Wow. And celery. I ate for like 12 weeks straight. Wow. While doing 2 to 3 hours of cardio a day.
At least it wasn't fish and rice cakes.
Yeah, it was literally fish and like rice cakes.
It was about as bad.
It was about as bad as you can get. Anyway, I don't know how, but I got myself in shape. I was obviously in a massive calorie deficit. I had to lose weight.
Yeah.
And I ended up winning Queensland and Nationals. Won the Teenage Nationals in 2006. And from there, I think the winning side of it, for me, I've always been someone who very competitive. So when I won, that kind of was a real big draw card to me. And so as much as how traumatic that experience was, it brought me back to the sport, I think. And I finished up competing straight afterwards. I think I don't know what people were trying to do to me at the gym. Then another guy at the gym said, "You should powerlift." And so I just finished competing in bodybuilding. And then I think a couple of months later, I did my first powerlifting competition.
Was that quick?
It was very quick. It was within a few months.
It was like a defined.
I think I must have finished I think I did my first comp in 2006 as a bodybuilder, and my first comp in powerlifting was maybe February, March of the next year in 2007. And so as much as I've kind of grown a reputation of being a good bodybuilder, I kind of started powerlifting around the same time. And I really loved powerlifting. I just loved the squat, bench and dead. I did them all the time anyway. I always liked the challenge of them. But yeah, it was something that, then again, the competitive side of it, I kind of did very well at powerlifting, and went off and did some nationals, ended up getting some records, national records and things, and yeah, that competitive side of me sort of drew me towards it. Competed a fair few times over those years. I think I competed in bodybuilding. I think I've powerlifted almost every year. There's only been in the last few years I haven't competed in powerlifting here and there, but in bodybuilding it was sort of like 2006, 2008, 2009, 2011, I did both seasons. 2013, that's when I did my last season. And then in 2013, that's when I grew Hold Your Own. I was starting to get quite a bit of a following and people wanting to get a fair bit of coaching from me. I was getting a bit more successful as a bodybuilder, and from there I was like, you know what, I'm getting such an influx of people coming, wanting to get trained by me. I wasn't able to keep up. I thought, I need to make a business out of this. And I'd known of a couple of people making businesses out of it, but really nothing too major. But there was a company out there, and I drew inspiration from them. So that was 3DMJ, so the guys from 3DMJ, and I saw what they were doing, and they were sort of, I was like, oh, that's awesome. You know, there's a group of guys out there that are, you know, doing coaching. They're doing bodybuilding specific coaching at that point in time. And I was like, you know, there needs to be something like that for Australians. And that's kind of where it grew, and that's when I started to look to get some people that sort of would want to come along and start coaching and being part of the company. So yeah, then I started employing. I think one of my first coaches that I brought on was Brendan Kempter, and so he was on board, and sort of he was very raw at the time when he sort of came on board. Josh Hampson. And so Brandon's now gone off and built his own business, but then Josh Hampson's still around. Got Zach, and he's obviously done quite well. I think you've had a couple of them on your podcast already. Liam Bygot, he's obviously done quite well. Josh Christensen, he's done quite well. So everyone that we've sort of been able to pull on have been very good competitors, but I think what draws us all as what unites us all is that we want to see, we're good competitors, but we want to be able to help other people become good competitors or be the best of what their abilities as well. So being able to, fortunate enough to be able to find some really good people within the industry that also want the same that I want. So yeah, and that's how Hold Your Own's kind of evolved and grown.
Yeah. That's great. And look, like you mentioned as well, you built from what I can see, and what a lot of other people will give you feedback on, is like a really tight niche sort of culture within the facility. And I think it's important, as you mentioned, to give back.
Yeah.
You know, and you found other people like yourself who are like-minded for the most part. You've got similar things in common, and you want to try and give that back to help other people enjoy their training or, like you said, be successful competitors. Yeah. So going back to your journey and through this time, what are some of the main obstacles that you faced and that you had to overcome? And that could be in whether it was physical, it might be injuries, it might have been education, it might have been even getting a facility together, which is now, you know, in Burley, if you like.
Yep.
Maybe talk us through some of those things a little bit.
Yeah, well, as a starting up the business, and again, another part of the reason why I started the business is what I was surrounded by. I'd been at some good facilities before. I kind of started my education personally. Luckily enough, fell into finding someone who was very well educated, and the style of training that we're doing very much suited my style of how I saw things. I was always very much against the grain of like what was happening at the time. So like I said, I got starved very early on, and that was I think it would have been very easy for me to fall down the path of that's how it's done.
Yeah.
Luckily enough for me, my brain is always questioning things, and so when I went through that prep, I questioned there has to be a better way, and so I just researched and I researched, and I hate using the words research because I'm not a researcher, but I looked online, looked up on, and started putting little things and pieces together. Anyway, so that's, and I was seeing other PTs out there coaching people the exact same way as what I got coached. I'm like, this isn't right. And then from there, that's where I was like, okay, I need to be able to, I started gathering some more, better information, and started noticing that the way that I was coaching compared to a lot of the ways that other people were coaching, although it wasn't the norm at the time, and quite often even the way I prepped myself into competitions was back in the day that we used to have, there was forums and all this sort of stuff online. I used to get ripped on. He's just a genetic freak. He doesn't need to cut water because he genetically doesn't hold any water. All these sort of things. So I think it would have been very easy for me to sort of go, this is just too hard. But lucky enough for me, since that 2008 period of time, evidence has started to come along to sort of support what I was always mindful of, the thinking that was just a more holistic way of being able to do things. The training has definitely changed over the years, and I think injury-wise, there has been some massive hurdles for me. It's always been a learning curve, I think, as well. I've probably injured myself more than any other human, just about physically possible. It's just one of those things where I'm injury prone, but I feel like I'm injury prone. It may be the way that I started out as my lifting career. It was very much a brutal style of training. It was no holds bar. And the biggest hurdles has been being able to actually overcome what I thought was right previously. As stuff and evidence that keeps coming out, I've got to keep changing and evolving as well. And I think it would have been easy for me just to sort of be very pig-headed and stick to what I thought, or what I believed was right back at the time, and not keep evolving. And I think that's a big hurdle for a lot of people. I think that not evolving and wanting to keep learning is something that holds people back. So
Sure.
I think the injuries have always been a hurdle. I've had surgeries. I've had surgery about 3 years ago. 2 years ago.
Yeah, sorry. It's gone fast, but not gone that fast.
2 years ago, I tore my labrum in my right hip, and so I had to get that repaired. And FAI, however, if people out there that know what FAI is, femoral acetabular impingement.
I think there's a fair few people within especially more strength-based sports who've had it, so they would definitely know.
There is it's a lot of people. It's funny when I never had heard of the injury ever before, and then all of a sudden I get it, and now I know so many people have had it. And mine was a genetic factor, unfortunately. My brother also has it as well, and he's a fighter.
Fine.
So it's something that it's more of a genetic factor. We have a deformity of our hip socket or hip architecture. More not the actual hip itself, but it's actually the femur, the top of the femur. So we've got a thing called a pistol grip deformity, where the femur, where it then goes up into the cam, and the actual head of the socket of the femur, it's shaped like an old school pistol.
Right.
And so then it pinches in the top of the acetabulum. So yeah, it's just one of those things that I like I said, it was one of those things that probably for me it was inevitable that it was going to actually happen doing what I'm doing. And I had to get that reshaped out, and there's probably a high possibility that it probably go again, or my other hip will probably go eventually over time, because that's the way my hip was shaped. But yeah, like I said, that's been a massive hurdle. It's also been a massive learning curve. Like before I had those sort of injuries, I never used to put a whole lot of effort into warm up. I used to warm up a bit, but it has made me appreciate and have to learn a lot more about the warm up strategies and what can be, how to better optimize training and work yourself around injuries. Because I think injuries, although they definitely set you back in progression, they also are a big learning tool, because otherwise you would just keep battering away and potentially not optimize your own training.
Yeah, I think, and look, having that, what I would call like a growth mindset, and that ability to learn from things that, they're not always great. These things are not something that we'd ever go, I want to have a hip injury or something like that, impingement.
Oh yeah.
But
I wouldn't wish those type of injuries upon anyone.
Yeah.
But it definitely has taught me a lot. It's taught me not a lot about that sort of stuff, but patience. I was a very impatient human being, and I've become, I believe now, a lot more of a patient human being across the board in my life as well. So there's a lot of other life lessons I think that's my personality. I've been able to, I always make sure I draw and learn from my from life, and some people potentially might not go down that path, but I'm always someone that is like, well, it happened for a reason. What was the reason behind it? And so for me, I've tried to always draw from that, and I think I've done okay with being able to do that. And like I said, I could have not learnt from my lesson of when I first competed, but I decided to try and learn from it and try and see if there was something better out there. So
yeah, like trying to break it down and assess what worked, what didn't. And I think it is a good mind frame to have, to always question things, like in a positive way. It's not like, that's wrong.
That's wrong, exactly. I never say anything that's wrong as such. I'm like, well, is there a better way?
Yeah, and then exploring that.
Yeah, and then exploring that. If that's the best, if I end up finding out that at that point in time that's what's saying that is the best way of doing it, then great. But nothing's ever solid.
Yeah, it's never concrete. Yeah, there's always new evidence.
Exactly.
And we look back and we go, that was not quite right. And then 5 years later, actually, it was better than we thought. And then it's always evolving.
When I programmed 3 years ago to how I can program now is different. Yeah. It's something that I could have said that was solid. I could have kept that sort of style of programming, but I haven't, because I've always I love my own programming. I generally.
You got to back yourself.
I got to back myself, and I enjoy it. I think I like the way that I program, but I know that there is. I could evolve it, and I look forward to every 6 months, a year, going, this is what I could add to this, or this is what I could do to it, and so I've been able to. I do that very regularly with everything I do.
Which is good, because you're always innovating, and you're always moving forward, and you've probably looked back on past programs and thought,
what was the thing?
Yes, for lack of a better word sometimes, but then also that's interesting. Yeah, what was I thinking? But then, I see my methodology, but now how it's changed. I mean, hindsight's a great thing, right? But then you go, wow, you don't even realize sometimes how much you've evolved, and you're like, man, I have so much more experience now. It's not that it's about good and bad and better and worse. It's like, okay, well, now my knowledge behind why I program like this is so much more holistic, if you like, but also well-rounded to create these better programs for people.
Yeah, so I think, and a lot of the programming that I've done has been something where I've pulled bits and pieces of programming from other coaches and stuff like that, and made them into my own. I think I've looked at what's out there and what research has been done. I look at how other people are programming at the time, and I'm like, okay, how can I build? How do I feel is best to put all this information together?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the sum of how I program. That's the sum of how I prep people for competitions. It's the sum of how I do everything. I don't copy. I try not to copy anyone. I try to make sure that. But if I find there's some good parts of what someone's doing, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And I'm like, oh, let's try that, or I'm willing to put that into my programming, and I'll put it into my program and how I feel is the best way to be put into it. I'll be like, oh, that's interesting how they've done that. It's a good way of doing it, but I would potentially maybe tweak it this way.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that's how I think is always good. You kind of always, as a coach, you've always got to have your own ideas around how things should be done as well.
Exactly. And it's good to acknowledge that, because, like you said, you don't necessarily have to, or in a way of saying it, reinvent the wheel. If something works and we know, okay, well, we look at, say, most strength-based programs, they're probably going to have a squat, bench, and deadlift variation in them. But then it's within the individuality and the specificity of the coach and the client where it gets individual. And I think that's a big misconception.
You've got to have templates of how you program, but then you've also got to be willing to individualize them to your client or the person. So you're like, okay, this is a good set amount of volume for the average person, and then you get a client, they will come to you with how they, what they've been doing previously, and you're like, okay, here's roughly what I do, and then you've got to try and mold it to be able to be not so much to the point where you're completely, like, yeah, you might have to rehaul someone's programming or something like that a little bit, but you don't want to completely go from 0 to 100. I think finding out someone's volume landmarks is very important. And I credit that sort of stuff to Mark Israel, and with his sort of volume landmark stuff, MRV and MV and all that sort of stuff. So I think, being able to individualize your own methodology, like, okay, this is my methodology, this is what I think, and this is how I program, and then going, okay, how do I best attribute that to the client, and how can I best build them from where they currently are to slowly progressing them over time. You don't want to all of a sudden try and give them the absolute most that you think someone should be doing when that person's only just beginning.
Sure. Would you agree then, something I've found in my own experience is that the more advanced a client or athlete may be, the more individuality, specificity, and I guess for lack of better words, complexity a program may or can have in terms of the percentages or the RPE, or perhaps some of the advancements in the progression of lifts, where and again, hate to use the word, but say more generalized population, or someone who's perhaps new to training, there's less complexity. I would almost feel guilty because I would have these templates that worked, and I would go, well, that definitely works. The individuality comes in terms of the coaching cues and perhaps usually the lifting volume, because I have a 40 kg female and then I've got a 100 kilo man. Obviously they're going to lift different weights. Would you say that for the most part that is true, where the more advanced the athlete, the more complex the program may need to be within those specific concepts?
Yeah, I think that when someone's getting started, there is such a thing as newbie gains. They can literally go in there and do not a whole lot and still get benefit and progress from that.
Yeah.
Whereas you start doing it as an advanced lifter and going in there and just randomly having at a session, you're probably not going to keep being able to progress. So yeah, I think there does have to be, and then once you start to get to the point where there's for a bodybuilder, for example, like as a newbie, you kind of go, okay, we just want to make general growth. We just want to be able to progress and keep making. Like if I had a young kid come to me and he was, he's like, oh, I want to be a bodybuilder. I'm like, okay, great. I'm like, you'd probably just try and get them to just, let's put on some muscle mass all over. There would be no specificity to sort of body parts potentially. They might say that they might want to grow their arms or something like that, but you know that they're probably going to grow all over pretty rapidly anyway. Then once you start getting some of those a bit more advanced, and it's like they've competed and you kind of can start seeing some flaws in their physique, that's when you can start putting some specificity to body parts. So for bodybuilders, that's kind of it. And then obviously you've got to also have the specificity and the individualization to a client that can handle certain amount of volumes. Some other clients that can't handle that much amount of volume, so you've got to pull back on that sort of stuff. So then you've got to try and find their volume landmarks. Whereas with powerlifters, you're kind of looking at, you're breaking it down even more. Again, you're trying to find out how much volume they can handle, but you're also then trying to find out where their weaknesses are in certain points of the lifts and where they're breaking down in lift performances. So for a squat, are their hips shooting up at the bottom of the squat, so their hips shoot up faster than their shoulders? How can we fix that? So then you've potentially, is there a warm-up strategy that we need to work on? Is there exercise selection that we need to add to be able to strengthen certain areas that doesn't allow that to happen anymore? Is there any tightness, so that potentially could be happening? At bench press, if your lockout's bad, okay, how do we fix lockouts? Deadlifts, is there a lockout? Again, another one that's quite common is deadlifts. Is the lockout how's that being affected? And it's funny with a deadlift, I've had, there's never a one shoe fits all sort of approach to it. I've had clients where their lockout's bad, you give them a rack pull up, or a rack pull, or a block pull, however you want to do it, and I've had clients that's improved it. Then I've had other clients that have done absolutely nothing. Like for me, for example, rack pulls have no carryover to my lockout whatsoever. But you give me a deficit deadlift, all of a sudden that will improve my lockout. So pulling the leg, because what will happen is something where the range of motion is a lot greater. So there is time and attention for that amount of upwards movement of the concentric phase of it is longer, which means there's more energy output towards it. So for me, it makes the movement longer, which means I can then, when I go back to being a little bit shorter, it's easier for me because there's less time and attention with that. I'm able to pull a little bit longer, a little bit easier at the end. And so I'm able to recruit a little bit more energy and towards the end of the lift. So again, you're trying to work out these nuances of, okay, one shoe doesn't fit all. This person's got a bad lockout. It may not be what you think it'd be. Like if you can keep hammering away on rack pulls and it's not improving, maybe change your approach. Shortening the movement wasn't working for that person. Let's lengthen the movement. Let's make it a deficit deadlift, or let's work on musculature. So are there traps of weakness? Also, we need to work on potentially doing some bodybuilding movements, some accessory movements to actually help build up the strength and the muscle that we need to build up. So doing something like a shrug or some high pulls or something like that might actually help that sort of stuff out. So you've got to kind of start breaking it down a lot more. So whereas like I said, at the beginner stage, give them a program, make sure it's got some progression model to it, and you should see that they probably will progress pretty well.
Yeah, I love what you said there about like having that approach where it's a bit like trial and error, right? You're going in there with a client and it's not always a one size fits all. I think that's a great sort of terminology to have, because that is then going, if you have that, it's kind of like you're going in with the mindset of being very tunnel visioned. Again, going back to what you said earlier about this is the way I program, this is what works, this is how it's always going to be, rather than going, well, maybe there's something else I can do, maybe there's a little bit more I need to read up on, or perhaps get some information on, or try something different that is, again, logical, right? Like you said, if someone's struggling with a certain part of the lift or a certain muscle group is underdeveloped, let's train that muscle group, but let's see what can happen. And then sort of getting that feedback, and then when you come across that problem again, might not be the solution, but at least you've got another tool, if you like, in your toolkit to use.
Oh, definitely.
So to segue into the more programming side of things, apart from some of the things that you've already mentioned, how do you like to program? I know you use a system called Recomp.
Yep.
What are some of the sort of interventions of that, and how does that help you program for clients? And perhaps could you talk us through, especially for some of the athletes listening, because I know there'll be a bit of a digression between more of the strand sport athletes in terms of powerlifters and bodybuilders. Can you talk us through the main differences of how you program, apart from what you've already mentioned? And then also, there's a bit of a sweet spot in the middle. There's a terminology that's popped up over the last couple of years, Powerbuilders, which I know is very much kind of how some of us train here, and a lot of other athletes as well, where we utilize those big three powerlifting movements, but then we've kind of got that bodybuilding work as well. Perhaps talk us through how one can program for that and be smart without not necessarily overtraining, but under recovering, if you like.
Well, I'll start off with the tool that we use for programming. So we use a system called Recomposer that was developed by David Hayhow, and from my research and looking into what sort of is out there, I think it's probably the most complete programming tool that there is out there. It allows me to sort of literally customize and build a program from scratch. I can add exercise, I'll add a day, add an exercise, add sets, what percentages I want to be working at, what if I want to have a rep target, I can add a rep target. If I don't want to have a rep target, I just want them to sort of go to, as close to failure as possible. I can do that. I can then also allow that leaves up to the person. I can also go, I want you to train at this RPE if I wanted them to. It's a tool, it's a programming which allows me to sort of really customize everything to a client. So like I said, I don't have an Excel spreadsheet template that I'm just like, this is what I want you to train, and I'd send that out to every single person. Yes, I'm able to build templates on that and keep them, but then it allows me to completely edit those as well. So every time I have a client, I can go in and go, here's the template. I'm like, okay, this client doesn't handle this much amount of volume. Let's delete some sets here and there, and then be able to track that. And it's a good tool, but what it does is also allows it up to the coach to be able to make it a good tool. You can have some people on there that have this amazing tool and the programming's subpar. So it's very clean, it's not Excel spreadsheets. A lot of guys out, it's a little bit different. So a lot of people out there are using Excel spreadsheets. That's been the going way of how everything's been done.
Sure.
It's kind of combining the an app related type of programming into like a software, and it just allows me to be able to program really well. So we use that. It also has a nutrition function on there where I can build a rigid meal plan if I wanted to, or set macros up for someone. It all calculates everything out for them. I'm always a big fan of, whenever we get a new client, I'll actually still write them a meal plan with the macros and everything attached to it. Because I think, although I'm like, you don't have to stick to this.
It's a good example.
It's an example of how I get them to write them, what sort of foods do you like to eat throughout your day?
Sure.
They'll send me a list of foods and stuff like that. I'll get an idea of how much they're eating. And then I'm like, okay, this is how I would personally plan out a meal plan. You can adjust this however you want, but this is how I would, if I was to have that amount of food, this is how I think would be best fitted throughout your day.
For sure.
They give me an idea of when they're training, when their work hours are, and all that sort of stuff, sleep hours and stuff. So it allows me to be able to build something like that. But then also attach the macros on it. I can also then break it down into meals if I really wanted to, and things like that. And it gives them an understanding like, okay, cool. I can see how he has evenly spread his protein portions out throughout the day. I can see how he's put carbohydrates pre and post training a little bit more heavier than he has throughout the other parts of the day. I can see where he's put fats throughout the day. So they can start to understand, okay, this is how someone who I'm coming to for their expertise would sort out the food. And then if they want to go off and flexible diet off that, they have that option. So that's how we use the Recomposer app. As for the other part of it, programming wise, again, it's very individualized for what we do. We have some powerlifters that are very powerlifting centric, where that's kind of their main critique, and they don't really want to put muscle on as much. They want to get the maximum out of the lifts that they're doing. They want to squat, bench, and dead heavier.
They want to get
Strong. They want to be able to. And what I find is in natural powerlifting, guys aren't necessarily wanting to go up weight classes. They want to try to get the maximum amount out of the weight class that they're currently in. Sometimes putting muscle mass on, although that is a benefit of getting, there's more tissue to be able to then contract and recruit, so then obviously you'll be able to lift more weight. So some guys are like, well, I'm really good in my weight class. Going up to the next weight class, there's a fair bit of muscle I've got to put on. It means I'm not going to be good maybe for a few years. So some people don't want to progress to the next weight class. And it's just about working out how to keep progressing the big movements without putting too much muscle mass on and pushing them out of that weight class. Whereas a lot of us who have that bodybuilder at heart, myself as one, a lot of the guys that are here, probably yourself as well.
100%.
Yeah, we want to get strong, but we also want to get jacked as well. You know, that's kind of where we all started. I just want to be jacked.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where that power builder sort of programming, which has kind of got popularized. I think Lane Norton's probably the one that probably popularized it the most. Although he kind of just termed it, or someone's termed it, and whether he termed it or whether someone else termed it, he used it as well. But yeah, I think I like terming it as well. I think it's a really good term because I think it allows that progression of strength, which I think is can be done while also improving hypertrophy. I've always been the biggest believer of for those powerlifters that want to stay under certain weight classes, you do the big movements and then you just do the accessories that help to be able to not create any imbalances or potentially improve the movement that they're doing. If they've got any weaknesses in those movements, that's all you're trying to achieve. As a bodybuilder at heart, I program, I'm currently doing a powerlifting prep while I'm still doing some arm focused training at the same time. What powerlifter in their right mind would powerlift and go, I also want to build on my arms? But I think it's still achievable. I think it's, especially in powerlifting, but I think it's something that's very low fatigue. It's quite high stimulus, like you get great pump, you potentially you can still allocate a fair amount of volume to it without the fatigue it withdrawing from your fatigue management.
Sure.
I think that's where the power builder inside me comes along. I'm like, I can progress in my strength, my squat, bench and dead very well, but I can also make sure I'm making some progress other areas.
Yes.
And if I wanted to do a chest focused, as long as it's not taking away from my strength in my bench press, it probably wouldn't. It only benefit it. If I wanted to do a chest focus, I would potentially put some more accessory movements around there to be able to focus. So that's where I think power building has its play. And I think it's a smart way to go about it because, as I touched on before, at heart, I am just trying to get stronger. I just want to be the strongest person I can possibly be. If it means it knocks me out of a weight class, so be it. Yeah. It means I've got more muscle, which means it's only going to improve my bodybuilding as well.
Because it's for us, I think, for like you said, because we want it's that holistic view of, yes, we want to be strong, but we want to look good, but we want to be like, what can you do with it too? It's not about just going to a meet and being able to pull and win the meet. It's like, what can I do? How can I improve on what I've done in all of those facets, rather than just for one day I can just pull this and beat blue shorts over there.
I don't want to limit the amount of progress I can make, muscular wise, for 6 months while I'm prepping for a powerlifting comp. When I could have made some progress as well at the same time without hindering the strength results that I could have gotten. I think that's where a lot of guys that do switch between the two sports of bodybuilding and powerlifting kind of get it wrong. They kind of never become good at both because they're constantly either just focusing on one or just focusing on the other. So while one they're focusing on, they're deteriorating in the other, and all of a sudden they start bodybuilding and they forget about their big movements as much, and that starts dropping back. And so they just know it. Whereas I'm always focusing on my big movements, and I'm always focusing on still trying to make some muscular gains. And I'm just making sure that, like in this period of time where I am actually prepping for a powerlifting meet, majority of my volume is going towards squat, bench and dead. But I'm also making sure that, okay, what can I potentially work on that's not going to be too fatiguing? My arms. I always want to work. Everybody wants to work with my arms. So it's like I'll allocate a shit ton of volume to my arms as well, and I'll do the accessory stuff for my chest, shoulders, and back to make sure that my shoulders stay healthy, and lots of stuff. And I at least go into maintenance volume of my back, and all that sort of stuff. And chest should be getting hit enough through the bench press to be able to maintain that as well. So shoulder wise, I'll do enough to be able to maintain. Like again, lateral raises aren't too fatiguing, so I'll do a shit ton of volume on lateral raises. But something like a shoulder press, I wouldn't be doing too much volume in. So it's just about being very smart about how you allocate the volume and the stimulus to fatigue ratio, which is something that was very well termed by Mike Israetel. What can you find that's very high stimulating? You can still make really good progress out, but it's very low fatigue in the ratio. So trying to manage, find what exercise of that, and then planting them into a powerlifting prep. And then when you're in a sort of the other style of way of thinking, so let's say if I was going into a bodybuilding prep, I would definitely include still the 3 main lifts. I personally think they're very important to keeping maintenance of muscle tissue, and I think they still have a very big role in a prep as such, for certain reasons. We can get into that, but I think trying to maintain my strength so I'm not losing out on any sort of potential gains that I've made with my strength gains over the off season or whatever it is, or while I've been powerlifting. But then I will start allocating a lot more volume to obviously accessory stuff and start pushing up the volume per body parts and all that sort of stuff to try and really maximize stuff. Because the accessory stuff obviously isn't going to be as high fatiguing, so then I can start allocating more volume to that because the fatigue ratio is lower, stimulus to fatigue ratio is lower. So it's something that then you can start allocating that. So just switching those slight things. I think, like I said, too many people either go full powerlifting or full bodybuilder, and I'm like, all it means is just a slight swing towards the other, and that's all I think it really makes you do. And that's where you can potentially, and in my experience, I think I've done okay at it. You can be a good bodybuilder, and then you can also be a good powerlifter. And you don't have to be mediocre at both. 100%. I think that's where other people go wrong.
Yeah, like those. I guess it's like fine tuning, if you will, depending on what your goal. And you've coined a term, strong looks strong, and I don't know if this is something that the next statement I'm going to say is something that Josh Hampson got from you, because I know you guys like to have a little battle on who started what. Josh said to me a while ago when I was querying him about some of the big lifts and about some of the rep ranges, and anyway, he said, Alex, something you got to think about is, a bigger muscle has the potential to be a stronger muscle, and a stronger muscle has the potential to be a bigger muscle. Now, the logic in that is therefore that generally if you can recruit more muscle fibers, and at some point if you can allocate more muscle fibers, therefore you have the potential to be able to lift more. And something that I've recently really got my head around in the fact that there's a great analogy, and I don't know if it was Mike Israetel or another practitioner who used it might have been Mike Toucher or somebody, but they talked about it as basically you've got someone who's got a mass at the moment, and our mass right now is capable of moving a certain load based on physics. However, what we know is that strength is a skill, and therefore the more we move through those neurological patterns, it's how well we can go from point A to point B. So for example, say a bench press, we've got point A to point B starting and finishing the movement, and the more efficient we can get throughout that movement, the better we can manipulate our load. So like you said, it's a good example there. You've got someone who doesn't want to go up a weight class. Well, how the hell do they gain strength? Because we have people out there who will say that they have to gain muscle. Not necessarily the case. They could become more efficient and more skillful in that movement.
100%.
But at some point, you are say a Nissan, you've got 200 brake horsepower and you're using all of your brake horsepower, and at some point to go faster you have to upgrade something, right? You have to upgrade the engine, the accelerator, the torque, you know, and then you can sort of level up. And I think it was a nice analogy because it's like you've got a certain amount of horsepower, make the most of using everything that you've got, and then as you gain muscle, make sure you're maximizing all of that muscle mass towards strength. Otherwise you're kind of leaving stuff in the tank. So can you maybe talk about, in your opinion, your experience and relationship between strength and size and the importance of the two to maximize not only hypertrophy but strength as well?
100%. And I think, okay, start with, I taught Josh everything he knows.
There it is, Josh. He's not in it, himself.
No, but he's 100% right in saying that. I think, yes, you definitely, there is that, like you said, the ability to maximize what you have, like the musculature that you have and the strength that you can potentially get. From there, it's a case of, once you kind of, you know, create this, you know, that, you know, the practicing of the skill over and over and over again, and you can constantly get better at practicing something. You can keep grinding at that little bit extra, and that's where guys, where I was talking about before, where they just want to stay in their weight class and they just want to be able to get better at the skill. So they're just practicing the skill over and over and over again, and you grind out and you get little bits and pieces here and there. That's great, but like I think when you think about it, like we want to try and maximize that, but then when you want to progress from that, putting a little muscle on, I think that's where switching between a little bit between what your potential goal is at that point in time is great. So whether it's a purely strength or whether it's purely hypertrophy, that's where you really want to have those nuances of switching between the two. And I think that going between the two is very smart thing to do. And that's where you'll see a lot of powerlifters in their off season. I don't think it's a very good idea to call it off season, because in that period of time for the powerlifter that wants to get really maximize just their strength that they potentially can ever get to, in that off season, that's where it's a really good opportunity to work on creating some more muscle tissue. And then once they actually then go into a prep for a powerlifting competition, they have more muscle tissue there to be able to then contract and get better at, and then be able to recruit more muscle tissue. So their motor unit recruitment is better, everything like that. And then therefore, potentially they can then pull out some more strength. So I think, switching between the two, and like I said, in that period of time, it doesn't make sense to then, okay, I'm going to put some muscle on, I'm going to forget about the big movements. It makes sense to be able to go, okay, yes, I'm going to now try and put some more muscle tissue on. I need to still make sure that I am practicing my movement, the movements I'm doing. If you're a powerlifter, practicing those movements so I don't digress in those movements. So at least make sure that I'm doing some maintenance on that. But then put a good amount of work into the accessory stuff to be able to try and maximize and try and put some muscle on this time. So then when I come back to really putting some focus into it, some skill acquisition into those movements, then all of a sudden I'm recruiting more muscle tissue, and then over that period of time where you're just practicing over and over and over and over again, you get better at recruiting more motor units within that muscle tissue, and then therefore you get stronger.
Yeah, which makes sense. And I think from a logical standpoint as well, if we look at it from a pragmatic approach, from a scientific approach to a degree, when you approach training, again, when we approach training, we look at building those, movements or variations of squat, bench, and deadlifts, or, pushes and presses and big compound movements in general, if someone can do it. I think if someone has the ability, depending on their skill level, or, if they've got injuries that you have to work around, to be able to implement those tools within a program, if they have any sort of goal of improving their body composition, is smart, purely based on the fact that I describe it as you get more value for your money, or more value for your return, because you are, utilizing multiple energy systems, you're working multiple muscle groups. For example, if you were to go in and say work a squat versus go in and perhaps sit on a leg extension and a leg curl, it would arguably be better to utilize the squat because again it can cause more muscle fatigue, etc. But you're working all those energy systems, you're working even more muscle groups, which I think people don't look at it in a rounded view. Again, they look at the squat and go, oh, it's just legs, where really it's a full body movement. I mean, a good example I like to use is we've got these big movements, and anyone who can effectively squat, bench and deadlift 2 to 3 times their body weight is going to have big muscles in and around. For example, they're going to have a certain size arms to be able to hold onto that deadlift. Their traps there. It's a nice way to look at development of, we've got a blank canvas, and if we start to build a picture, we just want to get our paint, we're going to get the main sort of things on the board to create it, and then the fine tuning is more of the accessory lifts and the specificity depending on how, like you said before, how the athlete develops. So when you're programming for physique athletes, or more of you again to general population, are these movements something that you would always include if and when the athlete can, or the client at this point can do those movements, and is that something that you'd agree with?
100%. So what I think people forget that strength is just strength in the end. Like, I think what the squat, bench and dead do for just general strength all around for other exercises is I don't know if this is 100% true or not, but this is what I find. Like, if you're someone who can deadlift 300 kilos or more, and I think it's going to help out getting you stronger at being able to do a lat pull down. You're going to be able to just generally stronger all around. You're going to probably be able to pull, on a lat pull down over 100 kilos for reps and those type of things. Whereas someone who's not quite deadlifting that much, and I think that has to come down to whether it's nervous system, whether you can build, this is a funny term, but it's build strength within the nervous system. So everything has to actually grow and strengthen as a system itself.
Makes sense.
So if I can get someone to just get stronger at squat, bench and dead, it's going to potentially improve the ability to therefore get stronger in the accessory movements as well. So I think both of them come back to each other. Yes, building more muscle tissue will then allow for better contractions to be able to move more weight. But then also when you actually are able to handle, certain loads within the nervous system, going back to holding 100 kilos in a lat pull down feels light within your hand. So all of a sudden, light within the muscle, because it's used to being tensing and holding onto 300 kilos, all of a sudden you've got to pull 100 kilos, it's not so hard on you. Whereas someone who's only deadlifting, 150 kilos or 100 kilos, to then try and get them to lat pull down 100 kilos as well, then it just feels heavy within their hand as well. So I think they both have a really good carryover, and whether that means that it's you're getting stronger within the nervous system, and then that's helping you be able to handle more loads and handle more fatigue within doing the accessory movements. I don't know, but I think both of them, obviously the strength side of things and the powerlifting side of things definitely has a very good carryover to also be them being able to handle more loads within the accessory movements as well.
Yeah, so there's
that answers your question.
No, it does. There's a relationship between the two, and there's a benefit depending on your goal. So before I get into my next question, to just dig a bit deeper on that, let's talk about that specific to female clientele and demographic, because there is a fear, I feel, from experience, when we prescribe strength training for females who want to improve their body composition, reduce body fat, and they come in and they want to be toned, they want to be tight. They use these descriptive words, and what we know from body composition is really, in relation to that, there's two main variables. There's the lean mass and then there's the body fat. And I think, how do you approach the education towards females to take away some of their fears or misconceptions about gaining too much muscle mass because they're doing these strength-based movements, or that they are going to possibly get too big and not have that desirable fit sort of physique that they want, rather than we see a lot of women that will go in and do things like a lot of Smith machine. It's very accessory, or they'll do a lot of like cable kicks, and they have their place for sure, but perhaps again they're putting the cart before the horse, as in they're not prioritizing these bigger movements, and perhaps these bigger movements that they fear that would get them too big, or that they wouldn't do the job because they don't want to be a strength athlete, would actually get them better results. And then they could couple with them perhaps these smaller, more accessory lifts which don't really have as much clout, if that makes sense. Could you talk a little bit about your experience with that, if you have much? I'm sure you do, because I know there's some amazing females that have come out of Hold Your Own who utilize all these big three lifts, and you would not look at them and go powerlifter. You would go, wow, that's a really fit feminine physique. I think, you know, your wife Sophie being a good example of that.
I think it comes down to the education of the role of nutrition on muscle growth as well. Okay, so I think where it comes to is the education of trying to educate females around nutrition, and I think the different roles and goals between what you're trying to achieve. So I think as males, we're trying to maximize the amount of muscle mass that we potentially get. Most guys are trying to do that. So we would potentially look at trying to get them into a surplus, a greater surplus, to try and maximize the ability to be able to put muscle tissue on and all that sort of stuff. With females, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make them be more adaptable to the amount of food that they're trying to do. So they're not necessarily getting themselves into a higher surplus as such. We're just trying to get them to the point where they're comfortable with the amount of food that they're eating. Most girls want to be in shape and all that sort of stuff. They don't want to put on a whole bunch of muscle mass. They want to get stronger. But it's about trying, again, like I said, when you go into a big surplus and you educate them about surpluses and deficits and maintenance amount of food, putting them into, increasing their food, quicker than for guys, we might increase their food a little bit quicker because we want to try and get them into a little bit greater of a surplus, so then we can maximize some muscle gain. Whereas with a girl, we're like, okay, we don't want to try and maximize. We don't want to get into a surplus to be able to maximize the amount of muscle mass that we can potentially put in. So we're going to potentially, like after, let's say we go through a dieting phase, which is generally most girls want to come to you, they generally want to get leaner first. Mm-hmm. So you've got to try and educate them on, okay, we're going into a deficit stage. And if this girl comes to me straight away, I don't want to put on muscle, I just want to get lean. You're like, okay, that's great. You teach them the benefits of strength training to sort of be able to create a better shape, and being in a deficit, they're not going to be able to put on much muscle tissue at this point in time anyway, so you don't have to worry about that. It's when we're into a surplus, and then you've got to try and teach them, okay, when we go into a surplus, there's to maximize muscle tissue growth, hypertrophy, you want to also be in a reasonably decent surplus. So with you, what we're going to do is not going to go down that path. We're going to try and reverse diet you out so we can actually increase the calories that you're eating, but at a rate that's slow enough that your body's adaptation is quickly adapting to those amounts of food. It takes a little bit more patience, I think, for girls. As I said, coming out of competition, unfortunately for them, they probably have to be a little bit more patient. And guys can get straight into, okay, I want to try and get back into growing some muscle. Whereas girls are like, I want to try and keep my figure.
For sure.
And I'm like, okay, so it's a little bit of like, okay, well, yeah, that's fine. If you want to keep your figure, and we can still grow your food up, but it's just going to take a little bit more patience. Whether they can handle that sort of stuff, it's individual, but we need to make sure that you're sort of educating around the surplus and the deficit, the maintenance amount of food that we need to consume. And then we also need to make sure that we sort of, with their training, like let's say they just want to maintain the amount of muscle mass, we're not trying to then constantly improve the amount of volume in their training that they're doing. We're just trying to make sure at that point in time, just keeping potentially the same amount of volume. Volume has more correlation to muscle tissue growth, so hypertrophy, than it does to strength. But we're also, with their lifts, we're maybe trying to go a little bit more higher intensity, or just sort of, like I said, try and work on that specificity of the movements and stuff like that. So and they're not necessarily going down the path of giving them a lot of arm exercises and keeping the volume on those type of body parts, so they might feel like, I don't want to get big arms, I don't want to get this, and you go, okay, cool. what we'll do is we'll still include a couple of exercises in there, but we're just not going to do a lot of them. And so we'll put more exercises into the body parts that you may want to grow. At the moment, glutes is the end thing to grow. So it's like, okay, we'll put all the exercises in the volume into glutes. So yeah, I think it's just around the education of not just their training, but the nutrition together and how they correlate to how. I think and that's all it is. And like I said, a lot of girls just don't have that education. For guys, they don't necessarily need. Sometimes it's funny. For guys, they don't necessarily need the education. They just like need to be told, I need to eat more. I need to eat roughly this amount of food. I need to eat this much amount of protein. I need to eat just generally more, and I need to get stronger. Whereas girls, it's like they're trying not to get. At that point, they want to get stronger, but they're like trying not to grow muscle and all that sort of stuff. So you got to educate them as to why we're able to do these type of things without you acting, and it's not going to actually result in putting too much muscle tissue on.
For sure. And I think that's a good explanation, having that approach around education and coupling the two, because again, nutrition is a massive, if not more important part than just the training itself, and setting those expectations going forward. I think something as well that is worth mentioning, which I try and put forward, is that if, sometimes it's a bit of naivety from women. They go, I'm going to get big, and we sort of go, well, it's not as easy as that. If it was that easy, you know what I mean? And also, I think girls are a little bit more complex, not only in their makeup, but, hormonally, etc., which is not a bad thing. But it's something that we have to factor in and acknowledge. And talking to them about that, unless they are taking any performance enhancing sort of supplementation, they don't really have the minerals to add as much muscle mass, or have the potential to, as a male, obviously, from testosterone and estrogen sort of ratios, etc. And that sometimes when they do add that lean mass, as you said, with that education, it's not going to be like big slabs of muscle. It's more going to give them those things that they described to us at the start, that tone, that lean, like that fit, that tight figure.
Which around wording with girls,
It is.
But you also got to let them know that their starting point. A lot of girls go, I don't want to get too muscular, I look like a man. And I'm like, your starting point is probably almost at 50% of what a man is. What the man's starting point is. So men in general, we just have naturally more lean muscle or more lean tissue. So so our starting point is well ahead of what you are. There's probably not there's a lot of evidence out there that suggests that girls and guys' growth factors are actually potentially reasonably similar from what I've read, but the difference is the starting point. You get the average size girl, 160 centimeters, 170 centimeters. Their lean mass that they potentially got at that point in time is around 45 kilos. But this is an average. This is kind of from clientele I've worked with over time. So their average lean mass might be around 45 kilos. You get a guy that's 160, 170 kilos. Their average lean mass at that point in time is probably 65 kilos. They're starting 20 kilos ahead of you. So the starting natural average of each male to female, the male is far ahead. So if a male goes from 65 to 85 kilos lean mass, he's now a big natural athlete. You take a girl, it's going to take a lot of work to get to sort of 65 kilo lean mass, but then they're all of a sudden they're not an 85 kilo human at the same height, so they're never going to get to the point of looking as big as a male because their starting point is a lot further behind.
It's all respective, or the word I'm looking for, relative is the word to them. And I think females have the ability from a nervous system point of view to recover faster possibly as well, based on some literature, which I don't know, again, if there's enough to prove that. And I think that's based on, again, their ability to tolerate pain via childbirth, etc. But again, it's relative because the loads they're generally pushing is not as much, but then relative to their body weight, they can be quite strong. I think as well, there are some, really talented, natural, strong, Selena Wilkie being one, amazing powerlifter, very strong natural athlete. They can definitely get there, but it does take work.
Yes.
I think kind of putting that expectation in place, like, look, it's not just going to happen. Like, you still need to work hard, but if you were to get quite muscular, it's going to take some real serious effort. And don't worry, we're not going to put you in that position if you don't want to. We're going to work smarter and derive, like you said, more of that volume, more of that nutrition based on what they want to achieve as well, which I think is really good. And thank you for that explanation, because I think there's a lot of females out there with, unfortunately, a lot of misinformation, and they end up doing a lot more but getting a lot less, rather than working.
The starting point is a lot further behind than males naturally are, and then, like I said, for a male to get to being an 85 kilo lean mass takes years and years, and that's years and years of persistent hard work. Of all of a sudden trying to put on 20 kilos of lean mass on. I'm like, that's 10, 15 years potentially of work. I'm like, you're not going, if you don't want to take it there, you just don't have to take it there. You can keep training hard, but you don't have to keep training in a matter of trying to put, muscle tissue on. You can do other things. You can stick back at maintenance volume and train well for what you've got, but just maintain what you've got. So, it's just around that sort of education of like, this is where you're at, this is what, guys at, you're just at different starting points, and then the amount of time it takes to get there is, like I said, it's just it's very relative to each person. So
I think the irony as well there is sometimes a lot of females will fall in love with the process and the journey, like ourselves here in the iron game, and sometimes they end up doing things they didn't expect. Like they may compete, or they may really go, I actually want to get strong, like this is really fun. I know based on experience, a lot of women, when you teach them the big main movements, they love it. Like they feel empowered. Like I don't know one female that I work with that doesn't love ripping a deadlift off the floor. Like it's like back in my early days of PTing in New Zealand, like I found a lot of women like boxing, because generally as a woman, showing aggression or being aggressive is not something that they generally do. And so to smash it out on a pad, they really like that. And that same intensity can be crossed over into like a deadlift and a squat, and it empowers women to feel stronger and build more confidence, and that is a carryover into the way they feel as well. And I think it's holistic, and I think it's great, and I really like to support that, because I think it's something where a lot of women would benefit from if they incorporated those exercises, and I think a lot of women, if they did, would be much happier with their physiques and also all of the other benefits that come with it.
I think that's a great point. I think, like I said, I've never done any sort of boxing style training or anything with clients or anything like that, but I think you're right, where girls probably might, a lot of girls seem to get drawn to sort of those type of things, because it empowers them, and then all of a sudden I think they can still find that same empowerment out of training and lifting if they go down that path. So I've had a lot of clients who become successful bikini clients or whatever it is, and be quite strong. All of a sudden they've done bikini comps and like, I now want to just get strong. So
something that when they came to you was
not in their interest. Not in their interest at all. It's like, I just want to compete in a bikini competition. I got a lot of
sexy.
a lot of online clients who over the years that have been bikini competitors and done quite well, and then they're like, and I've included the big movements in their training, and then all of a sudden it's like, I really enjoyed them. I just really enjoyed getting stronger on them. And then all of a sudden, like, my squat's at 85 kilos. I'm so close to getting to 100 kilos. Let's keep working. I want to try and get, my new goal is to get to 100 kilo squat. I think a lot of women, it's just, they come in with certain goals of trying to, look at their physique and trying to, get this bikini body, but then all of a sudden they do get empowered by being able to just be stronger. And I think that's a really good thing.
Agreed. I'd love to talk more about that, respectful of your time, coming close to wrapping it up. Before we do, there's a couple of rapid fire questions that at the end I'd like to ask all my guests. It's a bit more lighthearted, it's a bit of fun, and then we'll finish with my final question, which I ask all my guests. So these ones, now just answer them as honestly as you can, whatever comes to mind first. We'll go through 3 or 4 of them, and then we'll finish up with that last question. So my first question is, which does relate back to what you were telling me before, which I think is quite important. If you could go back and speak to your younger self when you were starting out coaching, and you just had a minute, 30 seconds to a minute, what are the things you would tell yourself?
I would say that I think I did everything right with eating when I was younger, I just ate to try and grow. Not that I didn't that because I was growing quite rapidly. So I got myself in a good surplus early on. I think being smarter with my training would have been good because as much as I felt like I've grown from my injuries, it would have been nice to not have them.
Yeah.
So just be when I started feeling niggles come on, not trying to train through them. That's one of the biggest things. Like I've always been someone who's always, I'd love to know the knowledge that I had now and put it back then, but that's not possible.
Yeah,
but I think just being a little bit more intuitive with my own body and knowing that, okay, yeah, you're probably injured right now. Let's not push the boundaries or that didn't feel quite right. I'm going to try another rep anyway. That was all. I've always been silly like that. I'm like, oh, that didn't feel very good. That kind of tweaked in my lower back here or there. I'm like, yeah, well, I'll see how it feels in the next rep. And then I'll go down and squat another rep, or I'll try to pull it again. I'm like, oh, yeah, that really did the job.
Yeah.
So
just to finish it off.
Just to finish it really off. So I'd go back and tell myself just to be a little bit more conservative or smarter with certain things because I've always been one of the things I've always pushed the boundaries, and I'm like, I needed to get to 10 reps, and I'm at 9, and that rep just tweaked a little bit. I'm like, but I needed to get 10, so I'll go for 10. I went for 10 reps, and then that really did it. Good job. And that's happened a fair few times over my long training career.
Mm-hmm. Good, wise experience. Definitely.
Yeah, just the experience. I wish I could just give myself a little bit of that experience. Yeah.
All right, next one. If you could choose a superpower, what would it be? Would it be anything related to Hulk over here, super strength?
Yeah, look, I'm a Hulk fan. I'm a Hulk or Superman fan. Super strength is always nice. That's always what we're really in it for. Love to fly though. I think flying would probably, as much as I hate heights, I think obviously if you knew how to fly, it wouldn't be an issue.
You wouldn't be afraid of them.
Yeah, you wouldn't be afraid of it. So I'm someone who, like I said, I hate heights, and so I think being able to overcome heights, which is I'm never going to be able to overcome because my fear of falling is too great. I'm like, I don't see any worse thing than jumping off a bridge with some rubber bands strapped around your ankles. Silly, or jumping out of a plane when you've got some string and some, a sheet over the top of you.
Yeah.
That doesn't interest me whatsoever. But if I was able to fly, then I could, meet that fear. So, and that fear would now no longer be a fear. So, maybe flying. Like I said, strength is always cool, and that's kind of the obvious one. But flying would be mine.
Always feel like a Superman kind of character.
Yeah, exactly.
Dragons like the ultimate, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
T2.
Well, that's why
apart from kryptonite.
As much as Hold Your Own has sort of been very based around Hulk, and that kind of just came through pure coincidence, really. Superman was always, as a kid, was always my favourite superhero, and I think that's because he was strong, and I think that the whole...
He's the best.
Yeah, he was strong, and he could fly, so he was bulletproof.
Jacked.
He was jacked. He just did all those things you really wanted as you were a kid growing up, and you kind of thought that you were, until all of a sudden, injuries.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, oh, maybe not.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's fair enough. I think that's a good one, man. I don't think you can go wrong with Superman. Like, who wouldn't want those powers?
Yeah.
All right. Next one. If you could choose, if you had one last meal, or you could choose like the best meal lineup, and I'm talking it can be starter, main, dessert. What would you choose? What is Nathan's favourite food to consume?
Oh, jeez.
I know there's a lot out there. It's a big question.
Went out to dinner a couple of weeks ago, and I don't drink alcohol. I haven't drunk alcohol since I was like for years and years and years. I've only done it a few times. But I had a beer braised beef cheek the other week, and it was probably one of the nicest pieces of meat I've ever eaten. And whenever I go out for dinner, I generally I gravitate towards steak.
Yeah.
It's funny, for someone who never, when I was a kid, I hated red meat. I really like red meat now. It was amazing. So I'd love to have that again, because that was just amazing. It was one of probably the best pieces of meat I've ever eaten.
That's a big statement.
Yeah, it's beer braised beef cheek, and it didn't taste like beer because I don't like the taste of beer either.
No, it's just it gives it that like part of the flavour.
Yeah,
that, like, crunch.
Sweetness. It gave it a little bit of sweetness to the meat. Yeah, it was very good. So I would go for that. Other than that, I really enjoy my own cooking.
Mate, you've got a few cookbooks
I've
there,
got
don't you?
a cookbook out there. But so I really enjoy cooking. So, and it's funny. We get a lot of the times I kind of get put up on it. It's like, oh, you should be more adventurous if you eat out or whatever it is. I'm like, I like my own food. Like, I went down for a trip down to Melbourne recently, and I literally did the whole, prepped a whole bunch of meals, and I froze them and then took them down with me. And everyone else was eating what was out on the platter, and I went to, I walked down to 7-Eleven at 8, it got me outside, and went down, borrowed the microwave at 7-Eleven, and
that's a handy tip to know, by the way.
Yeah. Didn't know, I found that one out. And then
baby rooms apparently in hotels, and airports and stuff. Just didn't know, but there you go.
Got microwaves in them. So
brilliant.
And I went and heated up my food. I think I made a really nice butter chicken. That's been my known for my butter chicken. And I ended up eating that because I love it. My own cooking is I don't mind. Yeah.
I like that. That's good. It's good to speak to someone who's in the strength sport world and actually can cook and enjoys cooking.
Yeah,
it's underrated.
I don't stick to the basic chicken and rice and all that sort of stuff.
But there's 1,000 ways to make chicken and rice. That's what I always say. Right?
Yeah, and they said butter chicken is technically chicken and rice.
It is.
It's just got it's not the plain chicken and rice. It's got some sauce in it and bits and pieces, spices and stuff like that. So I enjoy. Being able to manipulate a good amount of macronutrients to each meal into a nice tasting meal as well. So I've been good at doing that. I make pizzas at home. That's kind of my usual dinners.
Mm-hmm. Which is important, I think, because, look, someone who does consume a fair bit of food, and again, within this realm, you generally have to, and you're a father, you've got kids as well, it's important to make foods that are fun and not boring, not only for them, but for yourself.
I think they call it food palatability. So in your off season, when you're eating 4,500 calories, and you're like,
food skill.
you don't want to, all of a sudden you don't want to, make your food boring. You want to be able to enjoy it and I actually go, I've got to eat 200 grams of rice and 200 grams of chicken or whatever it might be, and it take you.
And you're like glugging
an
it down,
hour
right?
to get it through, and all of a sudden you make it into a nice like I said, butter chicken or Thai curry or something like that, and you're like.
Slides down, and you look forward to it.
Yeah, 100%. So I never get to the point where I'm like, oh man, I don't want to eat this, unless I'm late at night and I'm tired.
Yeah.
But other than that, I really enjoy eating my food.
Right, I'll have to try your famous butter chicken. I've seen it pop up on Instagram. A few people, it's a popular one.
Yeah, it's getting around, so that's alright.
Oh, mate, I'll have to try it. All right, and my last question, which I finished all my guests on, is: can you tell us about a time in your career, in your life, a major fear that you had to overcome, and what you learned from overcoming it? Whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
A fear.
Something, maybe it was like a perceive, it could have been in your academic days, it could have been in your powerlifting triumphs.
Fear of failure.
Clients. Okay.
I think it's something that I've always got that fear of failure, and I think it's something that's held me back. Probably the biggest thing that's ever held me back, and it still holds me back now. I'm someone who my want to win and be the best sometimes pulls me back a little bit, because it stops me from doing certain things, because I'm like, I don't want to fail, so I'm not going to do it. So sometimes that has been I think the fear of failure has been my biggest, something that's held me back the most. And I try to listen to people, and you read books and you listen to audio books about when you progress. If you want to progress, you got to be able to have lose that fear that you might fail, and Sometimes failure is a good thing because it makes you learn and everything like that. But that's always been my hardest thing. I'm like, I can't fail. Like if I start something, I have to win at it. I have to do well at it. And it has been something that has held me back in a lot of ways, I think. So it's also helps me to succeed, yes, because I'm very pig-headed and I'll just be like, nah, I'm going to succeed at this. And sometimes there's that I have then been able to grind out some sort of succession with whatever it was. But then in other times, it's probably stopped me from doing things. Like I have a lot of fear of failure. I have a fear of asking stupid questions. It's one thing that I just wish I'm very introverted. So getting something negative, I saw someone telling me something negative back of a question I thought was pretty good, I have a massive fear of. Like, I recently went to the UEBC and I had all these questions in my head, and my fear of asking the questions overcome me, and I couldn't ask the questions. So, and it's something that now I'm sitting there going, okay, now I could have just asked the guys that I listen to and I look up to, and they probably they're in the best position to be able to answer those questions. I've now got to try and listen to all their podcasts, try and see if they've actually answered that before. So it's one of those things where, yeah, my fear of failure, my fear of rejection has always been something it's held me back. And so I wish I could release that, but I'm trying to work on it, but it's something that I struggle with a lot.
No, and I think a lot of people will be able to relate to that. And I think we all have it to some degree.
Yeah.
Especially when you're around peers and people who you idolize and look up to, because you don't want to think that you don't want them to think less of you.
Yeah.
And you're so worried about that, and where really you should just be you, because they're generally half the time they won't, and they'll answer your question, and that fear is literally non-existent. But in your own mind, it does exist, and it's so easy to say to someone, well, just don't be afraid of spiders, but it's like, well, it's not that easy, because there's a psychological thing going inside your head.
That's exactly it, and that's why I've tried to listen to other guys that have overcome their fear of failures, and I'm like, I need to be able to work on that, but I just can't. Like, I try to, but it's just something that it is definitely a barrier that holds me back sometimes. So I'll keep working on it. Hopefully I can overcome that. Because I do think if I didn't have certain failures, like I got into the gym business because I kind of got, pushed into it with my, from my wife Sophie, and she's like, you should open a gym. Other than that, I would have been always fearful. I always wanted to own a gym, but I was always fearful of it potentially not working out. And I still have fears. I'm like, are we going to keep progressing and all that sort of stuff? And yeah, like I said, there's definitely been certain times in my life where I wanted to do things and the fear of failure held me back.
Which is understandable. Yeah. And like you said, it's
I
something
understand.
that we're always working.
Whereas some people are like, it doesn't matter if I fail, I'll learn from it and grow. And I understand that mindset, and I definitely wish I had that mindset, but it's just something I still can't quite get past.
It's not a switch. It's something that you have to make sense of. You have to get your head around, and you have to work on it from internally. And like you said, you'll build on that and you'll get better at it over time. But there's no magic answer, is there, like anything? But
then also, like I said, that fear of failure has also made me who I am as a competitor, because I'm like, I cannot lose. Like, when I was younger, it was like, I will outwork, I hate that term, but because you can work smarter and all that sort of stuff, but I'll outwork and outsmart everyone else, and that's what was my mindset was, and that's kind of how I progressed from my younger bodybuilding career to the thing. I was like, okay, I'm going to outtrain everyone, but I'm also going to try and, there's got to be a better way than everyone's doing it things. Everyone's just starving themselves and dehydrating themselves and getting up on stage feeling like crap and all this sort of stuff. I'm like, there's got to be a better way. So I'm going to be better at everyone because I want to win. And if I want to win, I need to find a better way to do things than everyone else is doing. So yeah, it has obviously paid off in certain ways. But then in other ways, it's definitely held me back as well.
It's always a balance.
Yeah,
And
it's definitely a balance.
people think of fear as a negative thing, but it does serve a purpose. Because at the end of the day, it builds character, and having those fears and moving towards them and overcoming them is what makes us who we are. And
definitely.
just like you have said, it sort of crafted your business, how you approach things, your accolades, your successes.
Yeah.
And there will always be fears. I mean, we're on the Fearless podcast. Perhaps and give you a nudge in the right direction, but that's something, without me going into it right now, that has a very deep meaning to me, that comes from a painful place, if you like, but that thing or that situation which instigated that has grown me to do what I do now myself. So again, the fear's never a bad thing. There's always something, despite what people say. Are people fearless? We look at the most fearless people in the world, say Red Bull athletes, people who are just doing these crazy things, and even they have fears, but their fears for us might seem laughable. Yeah. But then our fears to them are like so insignificant. Yeah. So I think to summarize, there's a really good quote I heard in the past few months, and I really try and keep this frame in mind when I interact with people now, and it says, everyone is going through an internal battle you know nothing about. Yeah. And it's just nice to keep in the back of your mind, because sometimes when people are not having a good day, or things might be a bit rough, you might not know that they're going through some pretty heavy stuff, and it doesn't give them the right to be rude.
I really like that one.
Disrespectful.
I've heard that before too, and I really like. It's one of my favourite sort of little quotes as well.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. I'm glad it resonated, but it certainly hit home with me, and it's a nice perspective sometimes to have, and you have a little bit more empathy and understanding when you go in and approach people, and like ourselves, we're in contact with a lot of people with what we do, and it does kind of sort of set the frame and the mood a little bit to be a little bit more empathetic and understanding, and perhaps be able to help people on the other end of the line as well. So I thank you for sharing, Nathan. I think it's an important point to talk about fear, and it's nice to share that around, and people who do idolize and look up to you can perhaps sort of seek solace and resonate a little bit more. I like to show people's humanic qualities, because people often tend to alienate themselves and think that they can't achieve certain things, and it's nice to know that, hey, we all sleep, we all breathe, we all eat,
definitely.
We're all capable of it. Just before we pop off, where can people find you? Where can they learn more about you? Where are the best places to find Nathan Wallace?
So to find me personally, I have my own Instagram page, which is just Nathan Wallace _. Then it's more working on, that's more just personally me. Sure. I share a lot of my own training stuff on there, my family related stuff. So that's me. As a business, we also have our hold your own Instagram, so we have hold your own _. And then we also have the gym as well. If you were local to the Gold Coast and you want to drop down or know more about the place, we have the hold your own the gym as well. So that one's hold your own _gym. We also have a Facebook page, which is hold your own, and then our website. So we have our website, which has got all our coaching services on there, a bit about us, a bit about all the coaches that are here. So that one's www.holdyourown.com.au. And then I also do have my own personal website, which is where I sell my cookbook and any other personal things that I'm currently working on at the moment, which will be going up there as well, which is www.nathanwallace.com.
Right. And I'll link all of that in the show notes below, so people who are listening or perhaps watching this episode can follow along and click through to those links, and perhaps follow up on some of the things we've talked about today, and look at some of those recipes as well, which would be a great help. But would love to do a round two. I think talking more in depth about more the competition phases and specific to bodybuilding prep would be really nice to do. But I think this has been great because it gives a bit of an overview. We've talked about programming, we've slayed some misconceptions perhaps about how people can approach their programming, and more about you in terms of how you approach what you have built to be a successful business. So thank you, Nathan. I really appreciate your time.
Pleasure to come back anytime.
Mate, absolutely my pleasure. So until next time, guys, as always, stay fearless.